Today marks the 1000th episode of our daily live stream, The Breakfast Show. Now, every good tale needs an origin story. It needs background and context. So let me take you back to March 2020 in the days before the world lost its mind over COVID-19. I'm a journalist, and for the past 30 plus years, I've specialised in the field of demolition and construction. And that's how I came to be in Las Vegas when the COVID bomb dropped. Every 3 years, the Las Vegas Convention Center plays host to a massive exhibition dedicated to construction equipment. I've attended more of these shows than I care to or can remember. This one turned out to be very different to all the rest. Before I left for the US, there'd been some news reporting about COVID-19, but that coverage was almost all about the outbreak in China, and it certainly gave no indication of a global pandemic in the making. Landing in Las Vegas, things immediately felt a little bit off. A few people were wearing face coverings in public places, and at the exhibition itself, many had forsaken the traditional handshake greeting for the rather more awkward elbow bump. But even when we discovered that one of the show's biggest exhibitors had pulled out at the last minute over health fears, we still failed to grasp the enormity of what was unfolding all around us. The penny finally dropped in a taxi as we were travelling down the Las Vegas Strip, maybe 3 days into our week-long visit. The radio announced that the NBA basketball season had been cancelled, and suddenly COVID became very, very real. We arrived at the show the following morning to find a huge number of exhibitors and visitors wearing face masks. Cleaners were busily wiping down door handles and escalator rails, and people were scrambling to organise flights home. The exhibition ultimately closed its doors a day earlier than planned, just as we were due to head back to the UK. I was healthy and I was going home, but the challenges had only just begun. When I boarded the flight to Las Vegas, I was both the owner and the editor of a demolition magazine. By the time I landed back in the UK, the magazine had effectively vanished. Both the advertising team and the printer that produced the magazine were on what would prove to be a long-term furlough. My ability to meet and greet people and to research stories had been curtailed by social distancing. Most frustratingly of all, I had a week's worth of notes, photos, video clips, all collected in Las Vegas, and I had no means of sharing them. That was where good fortune struck for the first of several times. Just a few days before I travelled to Las Vegas, I'd been a guest on a live stream. I quite enjoyed the experience. So, unable to deliver my industry news through the usual channels, I had a brainwave, host a live stream. I quickly called up the host of the live stream on which I'd been a guest and asked how it was all done. He told me the basics and he gave me the name of the broadcasting platform he'd used to produce the show. He then delivered what proved to be the knockout blow. He said, "And it's free." Over the weekend, I spent a few days familiarising myself with the software, tidying up my office a bit and prepared to go live. Now, at this juncture, it is important to point out the second bit of good fortune. I had an unfair advantage over those starting a live stream career cold. I already had an audience, both through the now defunct magazine and through the demolition industry website, demolitionnews.com, that I've been running for more than 15 years. That said, while the audience had shown an appetite for my writing, none of them had ever indicated that they wanted to see and hear me too. In addition, more than 70% of my traditional audience is based outside of the UK. I thought I might get by in places like the US and New Zealand and Australia, where English is the first language, but I had no idea how my South London accent might be received in other parts of the world. I was also very aware of the fact that there is a big gap from reading a magazine and watching a live stream. With a magazine, you can pick it up and put it down. You can read the bits that you like and skip the bits that you don't. A live stream, by contrast, is very intrusive. It requires you to stop, to look, and to listen. There's no skipping forward or popping back to recap. These were all things that were going through my mind before I pressed the go live button for the first time. Now, I said at the beginning, I'm celebrating my 1000th daily live stream. That's not entirely true. I'm celebrating the 1000th episode of the show in its current format. But that format and the name of the show came as a result of almost a year of trial and quite a bit of error. The first time I went live, I did so on a Monday afternoon. That show was called Demolition Daily, and it was cringe-makingly awful. I was sitting on a dining room chair, staring into a poor quality webcam. The microphone I borrowed from my son, who used it to record his guitar playing, it was at best adequate. There was no lighting, no backdrop. I was just a talking head doing my best to enunciate while ad-libbing my news delivery and simultaneously figuring out the broadcast software. Those early shows each lasted an excruciating 10 minutes or so. The very first show attracted 8 viewers, but they were learning too, so there was no audience reaction or participation. No one knew how. They may as well have been watching a goldfish in a bowl, gasping for air and struggling to remember what to do next. Remarkably, 11 people turned up on for the second show, and that 11 included most of the 8 from the previous day. That slow, steady growth and creeping audience loyalty would set the tone for the 5 years and 1,000 shows to come. Very early on during those Demolition Daily shows, I promised the audience I would turn up each working day for as long as the pandemic lasted. In my heart and in my head, I expected that to be about 2 or 3 weeks. But with my first anniversary as an accidental live streamer fast approaching, I bit the bullet. I decided to quit the magazine publishing and editing that had been my career up to that point, and I was going to become a full-time live streamer. Over the 10 or 11 months I'd been hosting the Demolition Daily show, we'd experimented. We broadcast during the day, during the evening, and during the morning, and it became clear that the morning slot was something of a sweet spot. More specifically, a 10 a.m. slot seemed to coincide with the break time on demolition sites and construction sites up and down the UK. And then it hit me. We were broadcasting at break time to an audience that breaks stuff. And we were doing so when many of them were eating breakfast or having a cup of tea or coffee. The Breakfast Show was born, and the rest is a 1,000 show history. That new show format and the regular time slot was a jump-off point. It marked the arrival of a new camera and a new microphone. The background was slowly filling with items collected on my travels or sent to us by viewers. And best of all, the kitchen chair was replaced by an actual office chair. At the same time, the show was finding its voice. After too much coffee one morning, I opened the show by shouting, "How the devil are you doing this fine day?" I now say that each and every day. For reasons I can no longer recall, I also said that I was about to leap gazelle-like into my next segment. That expression also stuck. The phrase that has lasted the longest, and which is still mentioned at the close of each show, is a hangover from the Demolition Daily. It was written at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, and I always implored the audience to look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. Even though COVID-19 has long since been consigned to the history books, that phrase has remained. It now reflects the hazardous nature of the demolition and construction industry in which our audience toils. The show has continued to evolve. The office chair gave way to a gaming chair. The microphone is improved and it now sits upon a boom arm for some additional live streaming flair. There's a new 4K camera, and there's a new light that gives the whole thing a more professional look and feel. In the background, there's now a neon live on air sign, kindly donated by a member of our audience. Thanks, Gary. By my side is a growing collection of name badges, lanyards, and mementos from the places that my show has taken me to over the past 5.5 years. Lining the walls, though out of camera shot, is a collection of more than 70 baseball caps from equipment manufacturers that are featured on the show. The studio, once a blank canvas, is now a shrine to the demolition and construction industry the show serves, to the equipment manufacturers that are a focus of each episode, and most importantly, to the audience that has carried us through our first 1,000 shows. Some of those audience members have proven so loyal, they now have a dedicated button on my stream deck that triggers a personalised greeting to each of them as they tune in each day. Even though I'm yet to meet all of them, some of them have become genuine friends. I had very little choice in the matter, but I'm proud at having transitioned at the age of 55 from one career to another so seamlessly. I'm proud at having acquired an entirely new skill set, at forging a new way to serve the demolition and construction industry, and at having built a loyal, active, and committed audience. But I'm far more proud of what the show itself has stood for and what it's accomplished. Over the course of 1,000 shows, we've shone a light upon countless issues facing the industry and the individuals within it. We've become vocal advocates for greater gender and racial equality in the sector. We've raised awareness of the mental health crisis that has given the industry a suicide rate almost 4 times the national average. We've reported unblinkingly upon accidents, fatalities, and corruption, and we've championed the industry's drive towards net zero. I'm proud that through it all, we've retained our editorial integrity. While those in the magazine publishing sphere increasingly do the bidding of their advertisers, we've pursued the news, rather than the next paycheck. And we've delivered actual and factual news rather than regurgitating yet another press release. Most of all, I'm proud of the many small victories along the way. As a community, we've helped people back into work. We've offered guidance and support to some in the industry, and we've become a trusted source of news and information in an industry in which secrecy, paid for publicity, and misinformation is no longer an exception. It's the norm. In 2023, 3 years after leaving Las Vegas in haste, I returned to the next triennial outing of the exhibition that had inadvertently spawned my live streaming career. I was walking down one of the aisles when an American man that I didn't know stopped me and said, "You're Mark, aren't you?" I said I was, and he, that's Ricky Webb, continued, "I watch your show all the time." Now, by that time, the global reach of the show was no longer a surprise. The live stream had already landed me the role as a remote judge for the New Zealand Demolition and Asbestos Association for their annual awards. I've been asked to record a video message welcoming the incoming president of the Demolition Industry Association of Western Australia. And over on Instagram, we've got a viewer that tunes in regularly from Papua New Guinea. Despite my concerns over a potential language barrier, we had followers literally around the world, including countries as far afield as Argentina and Brazil, Japan and India, and all points in between. A tiny one-man live stream, broadcast from a tiny room, and aimed at a relatively tiny niche audience, is now global. I will admit that having spent more than 30 years as a writer, I was initially concerned that my transition to live streaming might actually rob me of my main skill, or at the very least, reduce the time I could dedicate to writing. As it turns out, the opposite was true. I cut my journalistic teeth on a weekly magazine back in the late 1980s. Producing a magazine each week was demanding and required enormous discipline. But today, I write every single day without fail. That requires even greater discipline, dedication, and an almost obsessive search for constant inspiration. Thankfully, to date, I've never once come to the show with nothing to say. The irony is, if anyone asks, I now tell them that I'm a live streamer rather than a writer. The truth is, I've never written more consistently and more passionately than I do today. As a final point here, it's not a conclusion because the 1000th episode is not the end. It's merely the latest step on a hopefully much longer journey. But there is a lesson here. In March 2020, when I touched down in Las Vegas, I was a magazine editor and journalist. Although nothing in life is ever certain, I was honestly expecting that to be my job until the day I retired. I was 55 years old, set in my ways. And while some people are blessed with a broad range of skills, I had just one, the ability to write. In short, I was the world's least likely candidate for a successful career transition. 5 years on, the Breakfast Show continues to go from strength to strength. I now speak daily to a still growing global audience. I'm the fulcrum of an industry-wide community that has redefined news delivery in the demolition and construction industry. I'm not a writer that live streams. I'm a live streamer that writes. I'm 60 years old, and my new career has given me a new lease of life. Now, I need to plan show number 1001.